Okay, I will call this meeting to order now, and I will start with the land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land and these waters. Sorry. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Moving on to approval of the agenda, are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation that the addendum to the agenda to include a closed session discussion regarding CAO recruitment be approved, and that item 9.2.1, Barry's construction delegation, be struck from the agenda at the request of the delegate. And I'm just going to ask, did we have another delegation that needs to be taken off, or that got added late? So we don't need to worry about it? Okay. And that the agenda be approved as amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Schuldeis. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none, you may declare at any time throughout the meeting. Now we're going to add some happy time in here tonight with awards being presented for volunteer recognition. So Tobin and I will move down front. So tonight, we honor the extraordinary dedication and service of our community volunteers. Their selfless contributions make Georgian Bluffs the place we call home, and it is our privilege to recognize their hard work and dedication. Our volunteers play a pivotal role in shaping our community, enhancing the quality of life for all residents, and we owe a debt of gratitude to our volunteers whose tireless efforts truly make a difference today and for generations to come. Turn it over to Tobin.
Hello. For context, I also work as a high school teacher at Owen Sound District Secondary School. And while I haven't worked with our next recipient very closely, I happen to know a lot of people who do. So I had a lovely day today. People often ask me about my time on council, and I usually respond with something like there are challenging days and there are really wonderful days, depending on what's happening. And this is one of the wonderful ones, largely because of my lunch, where I walked around school and talked to Kim Robbins' past colleagues about her volunteer contributions in her community. You can't cry, because then I'll start crying. I was overwhelmed with a strong positive response, as well as a few tears from your fellow EAs, while people talked about how important Kim has been and continues to be in the community that supports our most vulnerable citizens. From what I understand, Kim could have worked in the financial sector. That was news to me. Instead, she chose a career working with our DL, Specialized Education Youth. In addition to her regular work duties, I feel like mentioning that they're sometimes our most unappreciated parts of our school system as well. They do amazing work. In addition to her regular work duties, she played a critical role as a part of the Owen Sound District Secondary School Breakfast Club team. I didn't, since I rarely do, know that Kim regularly showed up to work at 7:30 a.m. to prepare and set up food for Breakfast Club. She was described as a quiet leader for this essential volunteer-run program, the scaffold that holds everything together. She spearheaded fundraising events and volunteered her time to shop and bake for the program. That was all written in the past tense, since Kim has wisely retired and has moved on and opened up her life to some other opportunities. But one of the great things about Kim is that she continues to do many of these things, even though she's no longer technically with our school. She still does the shopping, for example. Many doors are decorated with her wreaths and swag, and which is one of her signature fundraisers. I think I just ate some of her delicious baking that she donated to a rather tempting week-long bake sale, all proceeds going to the school breakfast club. Above and beyond Breakfast Club, Kim continues to provide respite care for her past students. She doesn't do this as part of community living, reach for the school. She doesn't get paid. She genuinely enjoys the company of the people she looks after and contributing to her community. She extends this kindness and her trained services to some seniors as well. I think there is more. We suspect she contributes to Shriners and some other community organizations, but she is so humble, her school community cannot be certain of the depth of her contributions. It's clear that Kim, who was described as patient, caring, compassionate, an advocate for any kid in need, humble, insightful, balanced, one of the kindest people I've ever met, and just generally wonderful, is much deserving of this award. So Kim, I'm not sure of the exact process, but I think you might be coming up now. And as an addition to your certificate, I purchased a few things from the bake sale. There's one for Danuta and one for yourself. I'm pretty sure you didn't make these.
And our Lifetime Volunteer Award recipient is Danuta Valu. Danuta showcases an exemplary commitment to environmental stewardship and community engagement. As a trail steward for the Sydenham Bruce Trail, Danuta has organized numerous hikes and snowshoe treks, promoting an active and healthy lifestyle and deep appreciation for the natural environment that surrounds us. Her involvement with the Climate Action Team and contributions to Earth Day events, along with her extensive efforts in educating youth about climate change, demonstrate her profound dedication to our environment and our community. Climate change affects us all, and by engaging youth and inviting them into the conversation, she has helped create a more sustainable planet for the generations that follow. Thank you, Danuta. And please come on up. He was trying to move out of the way behind Thanks. Get that? And you get a cupcake from Tobin. So to all of our volunteers, past and present, I extend my heartfelt thanks. Your dedication, compassion, and enthusiasm are what make Georgian Bluffs a vibrant and caring community. We are so fortunate to have you among us. Congratulations to Kim and Danuta, and a sincere thank you to every volunteer who has ever contributed to our community's growth and spirit. Nominations for the 2024 Volunteer Awards will open late next year, and we look forward to recognizing more outstanding members of our community. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations. You don't want to stay for the meeting?
Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.
See you later.
So moving on, the minutes of previous meetings. The recommendation that the minutes from the November 22nd, 2023 meeting of council be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Is carried. The December 4th, 2023. So the minutes from the December 4th, 2023 meeting of special council be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Seeing none. No public hearings, delegations, or public question period or items on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603. We have no delegations this evening, and for items not on the agenda, getting on to the agenda is the same as before, only by the Thursday preceding the meeting if you wish to speak, and the same information for registering. Consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull off the consent agenda? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, I'd like to pull 10.1.2.
Which is?
Clean Energy Frontier Summit.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Winters.
Yeah, I wonder if we can discuss 10.1.3 and 10.2.
Okay, and I think I had 10.3.3. Better scroll down here and see what I do have. Yes. Anything else? Okay. So the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items 10.1.2, 10.1.3, 10.2, and 10.3.3. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so 10.1.2, clean energy. I will turn that over to the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Girl. I just really pulled this out for just for conversation as to the fact that it is in our own backyard here at Cobble Beach that day on the Friday. I didn't know if we had staff going to this or if they're invited to this or if it's strictly council is going, but I think I'm going to try and go. So I just was really wanting to bring it out to the forefront, the fact that it's at Cobble Beach. So it's in our own backyard.
And I actually attended the session last year that was in Walkerton. It is an excellent day of information. It's really good. So if anybody can make the time to go, it would be well worth it. Councillor Day?
I was also going to pull this one and am interested in going. I do see it's for local officials, staff, and industry partners. So it sounds like it would be appropriate for our staff to attend as well.
Yep. Okay, so can we leave it for anyone to give their name to the clerk and she will register us for that? If that works, Councillor Day?
Since it will be a day of education and workshops and I will be missing my other job, I wonder if this is one that feels reasonable for payment.
I would suggest that it should be. If you're putting in for a whole day at that, trust me, you'll take in a lot for that day. Any other comments on that one? Oh, we need a motion then to approve who all is going to attend that one? Councillor Schuldeis, Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Day, and I would as well. Anyone online? Okay, so could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Schuldeis, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, 10.1.3. The Ontario Clean Water Agency monthly reports. Councillor Winters.
Thank you. And more so my question I guess, is great reports we went through there, but I see that, well, and I know yearly we have annual inspections by the MECP. I'm just wondering if council can see some of those reports as they come through, if we can kind of make that an annual thing. I think it's a good news story for our water systems to see the rating at which the township and the operating authority maintain. And as inspectors change, typically every 2 years, there's different recommendations in there. So I think just as a good news story and whatnot, it'd be nice if council could see those moving forward, whether it be in a formal report or not. But thank you.
Okay, so is that giving direction, or so we just need a mover and seconder to actually receive the water reports? Okay, so could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Schuldeis, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, 10.2, under minutes. Councillor Winters?
This one, and I don't want anybody to take it wrong. I mean, there's no intent here. It's just more of a question for myself. As we just came through budget, we talk about a potential 3% cost of living increase for our staff. And I look at the Great Savo Conservation Authority at a 4%. And I just wonder why and how we make all of that consistent. I just feel as a councillor, when you start looking at some of our other boards, county council, county staff, and those numbers change, how do we make those more consistent? Because I don't want to look like, you know, they're better than we are. They got more of an increase than we got. It was just something that didn't sit right, and I just was kind of looking to have that conversation. I mean, when I look at talking about a 4% for the Conservation Authority, geez, you know, we keep that up, then there's more of an attraction to the Conservation Authority than stay at the Georgian Bluffs. It just, this is where I look at it and go, hey, consistency on this would be neat. We've got members on the board. I'm just not sure why that is a different number than what we're looking at.
So if I could speak to that one, part of it is getting Grey Savo Conservation Authority staff members to the level they should be at. I think last year they got 2% when everybody else was getting slightly higher. They are they're below that 50th percentile where they should be. And it was really just to bring staff up to where they should be to fairly compensate them for what they're doing. So that discussion was quite thoroughly discussed at Grey Savo board. And there were some members of the board who were against it. But all in all, based on what CAO Lanthier shared with us, and the decision was to go ahead with 4% for this year. The idea of doing that every year, no. But for this year, it was felt that that was appropriate. And I'll turn to Councillor Day and see if she's got anything to add to that.
The only thing I would add is that the initial request was for 5%, and we turned that down and asked them to reconsider. So they came back with some options for us.
I get that, but it's, and I'm not against anybody being paid for what they're worth, and I think that's important for staff retention. And just when you look at the optics of not being part of the board, you know, you can deal that through a staff wage review and everybody moves up accordingly. But you're going to see this down the road, and somebody's going to use that as the leverage against the negotiation, saying, Conservation Authority got 4, Georgian Bluffs got 3. I want to blend those. I mean, it's an optic thing. There's a couple of ways of obtaining that, right? But it's just, when I read it, it kind of stuck out of my mind. I just thought we should have a conversation.
Councillor Day, go ahead.
As a relatively new member to council, do you have any suggestions for how to coordinate between all the different municipalities within the watershed and the county?
No, but I was thinking as board members, I was looking for your advice on how you would reference that.
So we are told very clearly when we go on Grey Savo Conservation Authority that we are there to represent the Conservation Authority. That is stressed very clearly. But no, there was definite logic, and I'd forgotten about the fact they came in at 5% and we went down to 4%. there was very definite reason for doing that for this year. Would it happen again every year? No, I don't think so. But I think there were valid reasons for doing it this year. Councillor Coburn, you have a question?
Not so much a question as a comment, and I believe Councillor Winters has articulated it well, but I would think that if there is an imbalance as to where staffing salaries should be, that should be dealt with outside of the COLA increase. That's more of an internal or external pay equity exercise where those inequities get resolved. I don't see that as being resolved through the cost of living adjustment.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Well, I'm just reflecting on Councillor Coburn's comments. That's a really good point. And it flies in the face a little bit about what I was going to share. So I'm not certain about previous year increases, but it's tough to compare the municipal increases to some of the others because, you know, there was a time when there was a freeze on many wages, and I don't know if the conservation were included in that freeze. Municipalities weren't. So municipalities did kind of launch ahead of some of the other sectors. But as I'm saying this, I'm still reflecting on Councillor Coburn's comment that cost of living is not really the place to square things up. That should be done in a different way. And so I'm sort of rethinking my original point that maybe if we need to even out wages, it isn't done by the cost of living, because we should, you know, more to the point of what Councillor Winters and Coburn are saying, that those should probably be squared away that everyone appreciates the same increase. So there, how's that for confusing? I started out with a point, and then Councillor Coburn and Councillor Winters changed my mind.
Okay, if there's no more comments, the motion would still be to accept those, the minutes from Grace Hobble. I'm assuming it was just the minutes of Grace Hobble you were referencing there, so 10.2.1. So motion to accept the minutes of Grace Hobble Conservation Authority. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Deputy Mayor Pringle? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the last one is 10.3.3. And this is an item from Township of Coleman about conservation officer reclassification. And when I read that one, I wondered how it affects our local conservation authority and wondered if that letter could be forwarded to them for comment. And is this something that should be supported at the municipal level, or is this just something to ask Conservation Authority for an opinion on? And Acting CAO, Mr. Lovely?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Carlton. Conservation officers are generally speaking, I believe that they are employed by the MNRF. They're provincial officers, provincial appointees. I have to admit, I haven't reviewed this correspondence.
And quickly confirm that that is part of the OMNR, not part of the Conservation Authority.
Okay, so that's all right. And it does say municipalities' natural resource. They provide protection to municipalities' natural resources. So I wasn't picking up on that. I'm wondering if it was something that affected our local conservation authority. So maybe it's something we don't need to worry about.
We do. So through you, Mayor Carlton, we do have conservation officers. Well, we have a conservation officer that covers the township as well as a fairly expansive area beyond the township's boundaries. Staff can take it away to have a look into this, and we can bring back further information on this one if council wants at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, I think that would be appreciated, just so that if there's something we can be doing to support someone, I think I'd like to see us do it. So Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
Well, I mean, is this what we want our staff to spend their time on right now? Is researching this motion? I mean, if my peers think that this is a good way for them to spend the time and we're really critically interested in it, I'm okay with that. I'm wondering about moving the business of the township forward, though, and I don't know that this is one that I would say we need to spend a lot of time on. I have great respect for our conservation officers, and they do very important work. It's great to say, let's give them a raise. Let's give everybody a raise. But I'm a bit uncomfortable with comparing the work of police officers and conservation officers in some regards. There's a bit of a difference in the work they're doing. Full respect to both of them. But I think that when people go through a pay equity measure, there are things that they consider in that. So I'm not certain that we want staff to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if my colleagues differ from my opinion, I'm okay with that.
So I think I would speak to that in the fact that I was confusing this perhaps with bylaw enforcement that we have at conservation authorities, and was confusing this with that. So I just want to be sure that it's not something that affects the conservation authority. I don't see this taking a large amount of time and don't expect that it should.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, looking further at this one, it's actually on behalf of an association that represents conservation officers. I'm just having a quick look on their website. There doesn't appear to be any appeal from them. So I'm not even, to Councillor Thompson's point, I'm not even entirely sure why this motion is being brought forward by the township. We can dig into it, but as I say, it's on behalf of an association. It's not even on behalf of MNRF or an employer. It's on behalf of an association that represents members.
Okay, so perhaps we can just receive it for information and not worry too much about it. So thank you for that. So I'll just need a motion to receive that for information. I could have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Thompson and Deputy Mayor Pringle. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we are on to correspondence. Item 12.1, letter from MMEWG re BESS, municipal support across municipal boundaries. Does any member wish to comment on this one? Councillor Day?
If I'm summarizing this correctly, they are developing an understanding of electricity storage, and there's a lot of projects across Ontario that are at the proposal stage at the moment, and more coming. And this ties in quite nicely with the January 19th event, because we can't have renewable energy if we can't store electricity. So the MMEWG wishes to extend the opportunity for representative to delegate to us to educate, address questions and concerns. And I would be interested in hearing from them to learn more about batteries and storage of electricity.
Any other comments on this one? My concern when I read that had to do more with the fire departments and what knowledge is there about fighting fires in the event of batteries and such. So wondered if some of this shouldn't be forwarded to ITFD for comment from there as well. But I certainly would be interested in having someone come and speak and give more information. Are there comments from anyone else on this? So we would need a motion. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Mayor Carl. I think it would be good to learn a little bit more about it. Yeah, when you did read the letters there about fires and the gases and different things like that, to me, it wasn't really painting a pretty picture. So the more that we can learn on it, for sure, I think is a good idea. And I do believe you're right. The fire department may have some knowledge that we don't know about too. So I think it'd be a good idea to talk to somebody.
Okay, so The motion on this one would be to give staff direction to reach out to them for a presentation. And do we also want to include fire department in that presentation or forward this to fire department for comment?
So through you, Mayor Colton, I think your proposal to forward this to ITFD, perhaps through the fire board, and elicit a response from the fire board on how they're preparing to handle battery-related incidents, and it might be worth, given that we don't currently have any proposals in front of us for mass electricity storage at this time, maybe we can ask ITFD to comment on household batteries, vehicle batteries, and potential for expansion into large-scale battery storage solutions, and perhaps get a response from ITFD through the board, and then bring that back to council through that avenue.
Okay. So we need a mover and a seconder for that. So could I have Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Day? Any further discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Item 12.2, the 2024 Communities in Bloom Ontario Provincial Edition invitation. Does any member wish to comment? This is, I think, one that I forwarded. It's simply for information. When I first read it, what I thought of was places like Shallow Lake, where doing some extra decorating, letting the committee there join in on something like this to see if they wanted to participate. So I would be looking at forwarding this to the Shallow Lake Village Improvement Committee just to see if there's interest on their part, and if not, well, that's fine. Okay, do we need a motion to do that or just receive this for information then? Okay, so do we need a motion to receive it for information? No, okay. 12.3, letter from Juan and Christina Marziali, short-term accommodations. Does any member wish to comment? Seeing none, will we just have one motion at the end to receive all of these for information, or no, we're just receiving them? Okay. The same letter from Lisa Ireton for short-term accommodations. Councillor Coburn?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I just, when we receive correspondence from ratepayers, I always think it's respectful to at least acknowledge that. And I do note that the letter received prior to this one, the one before this one, spoke in favor of well-managed short stay accommodations. And I appreciate that perspective very much. But I also do note that 12.4 and 12.6 are letters from residents who have expressed some frustration and disappointment over how the short stay accommodation report was delivered and some of the comments. I have also received some emails and telephone calls since then stating something similar. And I just want us to be aware that when we reach out to our residents and engage them to respond to surveys, we ought to be respectful of their responses and not to negate their thoughts and opinions. There's only one thing worse than not asking for someone's opinion, and that's asking for their opinion and then telling them that their opinion is wrong. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, to offer an apology to these individuals and anyone else who felt slighted and disappointed after they had gone to the trouble of completing the survey on short stay accommodations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. And yes, I would agree they should be acknowledged. Have we corresponded back with any of these, or so perhaps we can do that, acknowledge their comments? And is the short-term accommodation working group still, so we don't have a place to forward these at this time?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the short-term accommodation working group is essentially wrapped up its work with the presentation of the findings. We can send acknowledgements to both the two correspondents that were sent.
Okay, thank you. So we will receive those for information and trust that they will be responded to. 12.5, letter from Keppel Sarawak Eco Team Food Cycler. Another good news story this evening. Does anyone wish to comment on that one? Seeing none. 12.6, the letter from Lynn Porter, short-term accommodations. I think we can group that with the previous two. And thank all of them for giving further comments. It's certainly much appreciated, and it certainly helps council make future decisions on everything. And 12.7, the letter from Honourable Lisa Thompson, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Ontario's Tile Drainage Logan Program. What's it supposed to say? Loan. It has an extra letter that throws me in there. Okay. My apologies. Okay. Does anyone wish to comment on that?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, just for your information, this is just a response to that resolution of support that we provided for the municipality of Erin Elderslie.
Okay, thank you. So we will just receive that one for information as well. Moving on to committee reports. Recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on December 6, 2023 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2023-144 to COW 2023-150. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Scholdice, is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Staff reports. Office of the CAO on the Biodigester and Lagoon Management Agreement. The recommendation is that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign a services agreement with Ontario Clean Water Agency for the operations and management of the wastewater lagoons. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Councillor Winters, go ahead.
I was just wondering if somebody would speak to it. I mean, it's a great report. I think Aqua does a great service for us. One of the things I don't see in there is what were we currently paying? What's the increase in cost? Those are the kind of questions that I had on it. And then the other thing is we keep calling it a biodigester facility, but it is no longer a biodigester. It is a sewage lagoon because the biodigester hasn't worked for 2 years. But yeah, just if we can get some sort of context to what this increased cost is, what the budget of the biodigester is, you know, our operating fees and our user fees going to offset the difference here, or will we have to increase those as well?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Winters. So this it doesn't represent at this point an increase in costs. Again, before I started, we entered into an emergency operation agreement with Aqua in early 2022. Yeah, would have been early 2022 for the initial part of 2022. That agreement has essentially been rolled forward at the cost of $4,066 a month through the balance of 2022 and 2023. Up to this point, there will be a CPI increase to that cost, which we're not yet clear on for next year, but that will be in the order of whatever CPI is running at. So we've still got to hammer that one out. This deals with the, as you say, the full management of the site. At this point, the biodigester not operating does have some care and maintenance that occurs on it periodically, but the bulk of these costs are for the operation of the lagoons facility. This is an agreement which the board directed us to enter into negotiations on for a 5 and 5 year. The initial term is a 3 year. This would be the end of the first year. So this is a retrospective agreement to January of 2023 that we would be signing, just entering into year 2 of that initial 3 year term. Obviously, the future of the biodigester on that site is still not resolved. It is, as you say, winterized and not been operational for quite some time now. The board has asked staff to arrange for a joint council meeting in the fairly early months of 2024 to bring back to the joint councils as a whole options for the next step for the biodigester.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you for asking that question, Councillor Winters. That was also on my mind, what was happening in the past. I'm also curious, and I had the same question when we first talked about the water rate increases. Is Aqua, has anyone investigated if Aqua is the only one who can provide these services? Is there a competitor who might be able to provide us a lower rate?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to you, Councillor Day. As I say, we're in a legacy pattern, holding pattern here, which predates me, and I'm not entirely sure of the context in which Aqua are engaged in this. Aqua are one of the agencies. There are other agencies that can perform this function, and so certainly it is something which there are competitors in the marketplace that are able to do it. The board's direction was to enter into negotiations with Aqua. I can dig back into the board's minutes to see whether there is a rationale for why Aqua and not another agency at that point in time. I know that Aqua provide water services to both the townships of Chatsworth and the township of Georgian Bluffs at this point in time. At least I think they do. And so that might well be the link, is they're already working in the townships, and so that might well be the link that was provided. And indeed, we used to operate this through staffing. So there are different operating models for these sites, so they can be operated by staff, they can be operated by one or more contractors. I don't know the context as to why Aqua in particular is on this one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do understand the rationale for if both municipalities are already using Aqua, there's consistency of service is also important. I just, with water, as the rates increase, any way that we can take our constituents' needs into consideration and cut their water costs, or sorry, we're never going to cut their water, not going to cut their water costs this upcoming year, but if we, to keep those increases as low as possible is of interest.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments from anyone? I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Corporate Services Committee of Adjustment appointments. These were deferred last week out of respect for the councillors whose names were involved in that. We didn't want to just put you there without having you in attendance. So the recommendation is that report COR 2023-054 be received and that staff be directed to present a bylaw to appoint Councillor Cathy Moore-Coburn and Councillor Ryan Thompson to the Committee of Adjustment from December 13th, 2023 until December 13th, 2024. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We could have done that last week. They voted in favor. Item 14.2.2, the emergency plan and program. So the recommendation that the 2023 emergency plan, program, and appendices therein are hereby approved and that staff are hereby directed to submit all necessary documents to Emergency Management Ontario prior to year's end. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Shouldice, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Councillor Winters.
Just one quick point. It's always been a question that's come up over the years with emergency management planning. Is the automatic default for a certified emergency management coordinator always seems to go to the fire chief. But they'll tell you that when you start doing emergency management planning, your fire chief's got other duties to do. And I just wondered what our thoughts are here of appointing a secondary one or doing something moving forward. It comes up every year, and it's something I think council should really kind of look at and say, we're going to have an emergency. Let's make sure we're prepared.
I will turn it over to our Director of Legislative Services, Brittany Drury.
Thank you. And through you,
Madam Mayor. Yes, so that is something that comes up every year, being the CEMC appointment, as is reflective in the plan. That is currently our fire chief, Jeff Cotreau. It has been for quite some time. We have had alternates appointed throughout the years. Currently, we are lacking in the alternate appointments area as well as in our CEMC. It is a priority within the management team to address that this year and to provide general training to the entire management team as well as the municipal emergency committee, the planning committee. So everyone has basic training as well as identifying an additional CEMC alternative to the fire chief. And not only that, but appointing an additional member of staff as the CEMC in place of the fire chief, because we do recognize that in the event of an emergency, the fire chief will have many other concerns rather than that of the CEMC.
Thank you. And yes, that does get brought up every time we go through that emergency planning. That would be double duty for the fire chief. Now I forget if I have a mover and a seconder on that one. Yes, I do. Okay. Councillor Day, you have a question?
I do. I'm always interested in emergency planning. Just it ties in with other things I do, like teaching about natural disasters. And I was looking at the emergency plan. Somehow I missed the appendices, and maybe they were there and I just didn't find them. But I was just wanting to double check that you have quick access to the contact information you need, since I didn't see it in the document. If pressed, I would, especially in an emergency where internet might not be available, finding the contact information for the Minister of the Solicitor General could be challenging. So just double checking that information is easily accessible for the mayor and also to the rest of council who could be the second member included. It's not going necessarily directly to the deputy mayor if he's not available at that point in time. So it could be something we would all need access to.
I'll turn it over to Brittany for comment.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. And yes, the appendices are intentionally not included in the public publication of the report, simply because they contain people's personal information, i.e. staff cell phone numbers, etc. So we do withhold those from being publicly published, but they are available for review of the committee at any point.
And go ahead.
Of the emergency management committee, or just again for if all of a sudden I found myself in that position and something happened to the mayor, I wouldn't necessarily know quickly where to look for that appendix with the contact information in it.
Right. So our CAO just whispered to me that we would be happy to provide paper copies to all of council, so you have that information. And not only that, the plan and the appendices are always circulated to the control group in the event that an emergency is declared.
Thank you.
And I seem to remember the first time I was actually on that, being told, here's your copy, keep it with you at all times. Carry a copy in your vehicle. Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say there. Just having gone through this emergency program with work here too, basically that's what comes down to. We all got binders in our trucks with you all the time. So, and again, going back to who the second delegate would be, you really want to have 4 or 5 people trained that can do it, and it's roll the dice who's here, right? So it's tough to say, yeah, you're number 2. You could be who knows where. So again, yeah, it's a great idea. The information should be available to all of us. It should be in our vehicles, and yeah, pray that it never happens.
Thank you. So I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Moving on to bylaws. There are no zoning bylaws, other bylaws. First one, the recommendation is that bylaw 2023-083, being a bylaw to appoint an integrity commissioner for the Township of Georgian Bluffs and repeal bylaw 2019-015, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Bylaw 2023-084 to appoint a clerk. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-084 being a bylaw to appoint a clerk and repeal bylaws 2020-108, 2021-051, and 2022-062 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson and Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Congratulations, Carly. And bylaw 2023-085, Committee of Adjustment appointment. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-085 being a bylaw to appoint members to the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Georgian Bluffs and repeal bylaw 2022-074 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Scholdice. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Bylaw 2023-086, 2024 fees and charges. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-086 being a bylaw to, this isn't making sense, for the imposition and collection of fees and charges for certain municipal services and activities for 2024 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scholdice. Deputy Mayor Pringle. I will refer to staff for comment on this.
Yes, and through your chair, I just wanted to highlight there have been 3 administrative changes to this bylaw since it was presented on November 1st. The first is to the water rate schedule. The rates are reflective of what was discussed at Committee of the Whole and then ratified tonight. Same with the cemetery schedule. They are reflective of what was discussed at Committee of the Whole and ratified tonight. And then included in the planning schedule is a one line that some planning applications may be subject to external government fees, such as Grey Sauble Conservation and Grey County planning fees. We did not include the fees within our bylaw, as those are set by the external agencies, but we have included that disclaimer.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anyone regarding that recommendation? Councillor Winters?
It's not a question. It just, again, when I was reading it, it's great. All of them there. There's one that sticks out in my mind, and it's probably not the time to talk about it tonight. But it's if we decide to dispose of shore road allowance and only charge a fee of $2,000 for valuable waterfront property. I think that is extremely undervalued. And I'm okay leaving it in here tonight if council's willing to look at it again, or whether we strike that out of there tonight, put an increased number in there. It's just one of those things. Everything else looks very reasonable, acceptable. But selling municipal property that's waterfront at a very, very low rate, just when I was reading that, just jumped off the page at me.
Thank you for bringing that one up. That one did jump out at me as well, given the situation we're in with the shore road allowances, that perhaps that one should be changed or something different in there.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, good catch, Councillor Winters. We can't actually dispose of land at that price anyway, because we have to bring it back to you, and it has to be disposed of at fair market value. So we can strike that from the fees and charges bylaw. Could we? I mean, it's actually immaterial because we can't ever charge that fee anyway without coming back to you. So it's staying in the fees and charges bylaw is neither here nor there, because we have to bring it back and sell at fair market value anyway.
So through your chair, this is the administrative fee part. It is not the actual cost or proceeds on the sale of the shoreline. It's just the administrative aspect associated if council were to dispose of any shoreline.
I would suggest then it needs to get reworded to reflect that. I took it the same way Councillor Winters did. even as I suspected it was just an administrative fee, but it didn't read clearly that way to me. Councillor Winters.
I agree. It says a $2,000 fee plus costs. So when I read plus costs, the costs are administration. But yeah, if we can strike it out, or I don't want to give anybody the misconception tonight that, hey, tomorrow we're having a yard sale and we're giving a bunch of stuff away. That's not the intent. But if we can change it to strike it, as current market value plus an administration fee, or take it off in general entirety, so it has to come back to council. Again, I just doesn't want to look like we're having a fire sale.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Winters, I believe it's just going to be easier for us just to strike that. So we would probably need a motion and a vote to strike that one fee from it. Would make that amendment, and that would suffice.
Okay, so what I need is a mover and a seconder to amend that motion to strike the shoreline road allowance section out of it. Councillor Winters, Deputy Mayor Pringle, is there any further discussion on that item? I will call the vote on the amended motion. All in favor? That is carried, and then I will go back to the main motion and call the vote on that one. All in favor? That is carried as well then. So moving on then, the next bylaw is, the recommendation is that bylaw 2023-087, being a bylaw to adopt the 2023 Emergency Management Plan and Program for the Township of Georgian Bluffs, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle, is there any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. The next item, to appoint a deputy clerk. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-088, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy clerk and repeal bylaw 2022-073, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Congratulations, Rayburn. There is no unfinished business. New business is renewal of the Ontario Invasive Species Strategic Plan. The recommendation is that staff be directed to submit comment on behalf of council in advance of the January 4th, 2024 deadline. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schuldeis, Councillor Day. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Day.
Any work on invasive species work, if well done, is beneficial in my mind. I had two comments. One, an interest in seeing more collaboration, where possible. I know it's really difficult because there's so much about landowner responsibility. So you end up with this patchwork of invasive species management. But if your neighbor doesn't care, then it's very hard to control something on township property, or and if the township's not looking after something, it's hard for the neighbor to control it, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. So collaboration, it seems like a very important aspect of invasive species management, and just being aware of how our ditching work can impact invasive species. I recently heard a report about when the township purchased the larger brushing tool, about how after that year, when it went down some roads at the end of concession 4, the eastern end of concession 24, there's now Phragmites in there where there wasn't Phragmites before. Invasive species are great at taking over disturbed land. So where we disturb it, that's where they tend to go. So those are a few of my thoughts on invasive species, and I will cut myself off there because we could have a whole meeting about them.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments on that? I was the one to bring this one forward, and when I brought it forward here, I also forwarded that same notice that was received to Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. So I know that they are going to be commenting on it as well, and just wonder if there's a way we can collaborate with them as well. I hear Councillor Day's concerns about we can do everything we can on municipally owned land, on Grey Sauble Conservation. how do we get the private landowners involved as well? And is that one of the recommendations that can be made, that there needs to be funding available to go out to private landowners? I can think of invasive species that are on my own property. I can try to control them, but without assistance, I'm not going to get very far. And I'm sure others feel the same way. So I just wonder if that could be part of our suggestion going forward.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I'll reach out to Mr. Lanthier next week and find out who's coordinating response on behalf of the Conservation Authority. And certainly we can look to collaborate and comments and mirror one another's comments in this. And I think, to Councillor Day's point, collaboration is a critical piece of an invasive species strategy. Just for clarity, at this point in time, the township does virtually nothing when it comes to invasive species. We manage noxious weeds on our property, which are covered by the Weeds Act. We do very little for invasive species because of the funding challenges associated to it. The fact of the matter is there's very little funding that's available for invasive species management. We all know it's important. We all know we need to do it. But it's one of those things which is potentially prohibitively expensive because it has to be done in certain ways at certain seasons. The municipality's arms are significantly tied in many ways. So the legislation around chemical use actually acts against us when it comes to managing invasive species, because we have one piece of legislation which restricts arms in other places. And so some of the comments that staff will be making around this will be about making sure that legislation is coordinated so that we don't actually strangle ourselves in dealing with these things and restrict our ability to manage invasive species, but certainly collaboration and coordinated funding to tackle these things. Ultimately, the way the strategy is written is it's very, very quiet on that piece. The most expensive way of dealing with invasive species is once it has landed. And so the strategy's main thrust is actually trying to stop these things from landing in the first place. It is largely silent on what to do with the ones once they've already got here. And we've spent millions of dollars, billions of dollars across the province in terms of emerald ash borer. Phragmites is a similar issue, and these are just two invasive species. Asian longhorn beetle. There are many, many others that impact both our aquatic and terrestrial environments on a daily basis, and cost us billions of dollars every single year as a province, and that's just fighting them where they are already having an economically negative impact. We turn a largely blind eye because of the costs associated with managing them when they're already established in our natural environment, around our roadsides, trails, and so on and so forth. So certainly some of the comments that staff were considering making in this one reflect on the need for collaboration and the need for funding and sustainable strategies to tackle invasive species once they become established, and how do we move that needle forward. So both comments taken on board, and I will reach out to Mr. Lanthier next week.
Thank you. And I think if I had one thing to add to that, it would be education to people, to let them know what the invasive species are. I think of 31 years ago discovering I had periwinkle on my place, and somebody said, "Oh, that's really pretty. It's such a pretty little plant." Now it's taken over all over. If I'd have known at the time it was one tiny little spot, I could have got rid of it. So education is the key to a lot of that, to preventing it from getting here to start with. So thank you. We will leave that with staff, and I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion? Seeing none, the next motion is to go into closed session. Recommendation that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs move into closed session at 6:03 p.m. in the council chambers, with the HR manager and clerk remaining in the room to discuss 19.1 labor relations or employee negotiations, open meeting exemption D of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, CAO recruitment. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We are now moving into closed session. So, reporting out of closed session, council went into closed session under open meeting exemption D of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. As a result of closed session discussions, the following action was taken. 19.1, direction was provided to staff. The confirming bylaw, the recommendation that bylaw number 2023-089, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on December 13th, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Coburn, is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Date of the next regular meeting is Committee of the Whole, January 10th at 5 p.m. If there's no other business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shouldice, Deputy Mayor Pringle, all in favor. This carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. If I don't see you before.